Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Hello, my name is Linda Maurice, and I'm the Executive Director of the Jewish Council of North Central Florida, or JCNCF, as we call ourselves, coming to you from Gainesville, Florida. It's my pleasure to welcome you to This Doesn't Happen in My Community, Understanding Violence Against Girls and Young Women locally and globally. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. Of course, we're on Zoom. This event is being recorded, and we ask that everyone please make sure that their settings are on mute. JCNCF is part of the larger UJA-Federation system that represents nearly 150 independent federations and a network of 300 smaller communities around the US that we are a part of. Part of our mission is to provide educational programming that enriches the Jewish community locally, regionally, and around the world. This special event, educational event, was designed in partnership with Beit Ruth for young women and girls at risk. Beit Ruth is a long-term therapeutic residence, school, and youth village in Israel with a mission to ensure that vulnerable and at-risk girls are given the opportunity to thrive emotionally, socially, and academically, thereby breaking the cycle of violence for themselves and future generations of children. Through advocacy, Beit Ruth shares its best practices and model program to educate, empower, and engage a global community to create social change, which is exactly why we are all here today. JCNCF and Beit Ruth have been partners for many years as a way to enrich our local community by being involved in important issues in Israel. We have many community members who have visited the Beit Ruth village over the years, and they have seen the change they are helping to create in action. I'm going to turn it over now to Danielle Burenstein, Beit Ruth's Executive Director. Danielle has led Beit Ruth and Beit Ruth's team since 2016, growing the organization to higher levels of community building, partnerships, and impact. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you so much, Linda. Beit Ruth is so grateful for our long-term partnership with JCNCF that has brought all of us together today to educate and to be educated about violence and abuse against girls and young women everywhere. I'm proud to share that we're represented today with participants from Ghana to Liberia, Myanmar, India, Latin America, Israel to the United States, and elsewhere around the world. And I know people are joining as I'm speaking. So welcome, everybody. During the next hour, we'll be hearing from experts in the field of gender-based violence and trauma treatment. The United Nations calls violence against women and girls a human rights violation with, and I quote, immediate and long-term physical, sexual, and mental consequences for women and girls that can be devastating, end quote. That's why the United Nations made ending gender-based violence one of its priority 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And so I want to thank you all for being here as both advocates and allies in the fight to end violence against girls and young women. At Beit Ruth, we understand that in order to create greater social change, we have to partner with like-minded organizations and government entities and advocate for policies that end biases against girls and women. We're proud to continue this spirit of partnership today and of the relationships we have built with communities in the United States, in Israel, and around the world. We know that it's a natural human response to deny problems in our own communities and to think about issues as happening out there or over there or to those people, but not here and not to us, not with my people. Our vision today is to confront the challenge of gender-based violence by looking into all of our communities and to realize that violence afflicts everyone, regardless of background, education, religion, or wealth. Since its founding, Beit Ruth has viewed this crisis through a holistic framework to fully understand the impact. And to create the kind of holistic solutions that Beit Ruth seeks, we're bringing together a wide array of perspectives on the issue. We hope what you hear today provokes thought and, even more importantly, inspires action. To start us off today is leadership from the Golda Meir-Mashav Carmel International Training Center, an arm of Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mashav presents training around the globe that address the underlying causes of violence and persistent gender inequalities that normalize such violence. Randy Kogan is a trauma therapist who has worked in the field of mental health counseling for more than 3 decades. Randy was recently featured in Ghislaine Maxwell, Filthy Rich, the Netflix documentary about Miss Maxwell, the partner of Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender here in the United States, who was found dead in prison while awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. The documentary examines Maxwell's role in this decades-long abuse case that involved recruiting teenage girls for the sole purpose of engaging in sex, and then the trial that led to her conviction as a sex offender. Randy treated some of Epstein's teenage victims, helping them work through the trauma. And today she'll break down the terms, including grooming and exploitation, as well as present ways to protect children from grooming, and how we, the collective we, can talk with victims if we suspect or know of abuse against them. My colleague in Israel, Mor Lippin, will present Beit Ruth's pioneering methodology and treatment of teenage girls who come to Beit Ruth after being removed from their homes by court order due to physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. As Mor will share, Beit Ruth was one of the first organizations in Israel to address abuse through a specific gender lens. Joining us from UJA New York Federation is its scholar in residence, Rabbi Menachem Creditor, an acclaimed author, scholar, and speaker. Rabbi Creditor will share the Jewish community's responsibility as part of the responsibilities of communities around the world to end violence against girls and young women, and how men can and need to be allies in this effort. Following our esteemed panel of speakers, we're going to moderate questions. We'll be monitoring the chat, so please feel free to add questions during the presentations. Our goal today is to help all of us better understand how abuse happens, how to identify it, how to talk with victims, the trauma that abuse causes, and methods to treat it, as well as to understand that wherever you or we are in the world, we can all be part of the fight and the solution to end violence against girls and young women everywhere. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Ambassador Irit Savion. Ambassador Savion is a career diplomat with more than 30 years of service in the Israeli Foreign Ministry. She's currently the director of the Mashav Training and Capacity Building Department within Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the former ambassador to Angola, Mozambique, and Sao Tome and Principe in Africa. It is my pleasure to introduce Ambassador Savion.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Thank you very, very much. And I'll start with apologizing. Mashav, Israel's Agency for International Development Cooperation, is also covering humanitarian aid from Israel for around the world. We've been working very hard to dispatch the Israeli forces and Israeli aid to Turkey in the past few days. I was not supposed to be in the car now. I was dispatched to Jerusalem. So I'm here talking to you on my way to Jerusalem for good cause. So my apologies, first of all. I'll start with thanking Beit Ruth, Susan Ashner, the founder, the woman behind the idea, everything. Thank you, Susan, for caring enough to take your experience, to take your world and bring it here to Israel. Thank you very much, Daniel, for being the executive director of Beit Ruth. And I don't know if Alisa Einhorn is online, but Alisa, I think you're here. Thank you also for all your hard work and your partnership over the years. I want to thank Linda Maurice from the North Central community of Florida. Thank you very much for partnering with us. Rabbi Gardner from the UJA-Federation and all the partners who are online. I want to thank especially Beit Ruth in Israel. And it's true that it's Mor Ben Shimon Mor who will be talking to you today. But Ronit Levari has been the founder of the partnership with Mashav, the founder of the partnership. But she started Ronit, and we have good connections with her for a long, long time. I also would like to thank very much Shachar Rehem. Shachar is the director of our MCTC, Mashav Carmel Training Center. Mashav has On top of the humanitarian aid, the training oversees 3 core training centers in Israel, and Carmel is one of them, and very important one. So thank you for all our partners, because working with Beit Ruth and with Beit Ruth team has had great importance for us, for Mashav. Over the years, we have brought groups to visit, to see, to understand the way the concept of Beit Ruth is working, giving solutions for girls, for young women who had nowhere else to turn to. So thank you very much, Beit Ruth, for all your amazing work and for your partnership over the years. And of course, thank you for all Mashav alumni who are online, and all the Central North Florida community members who are with us online. I'm sure you're going to have a fascinating afternoon or morning at your place, listening to Randy Kogan, a known professional in in this field. And thank you, Randy, for all your hard work over the years, not just in the Bernie Epstein. That might came out to the light and been published, but I'm sure that your hard work and effort have helped many young women and girls over the years. So thank you all, and looking forward to listening.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Savion. Thank you for joining us from the car. We know how precious your time is and the work that you're doing now in Turkey and Syria. So thank you so much. Dr. Shakar Rem is the director of the Golda Meir Mashav Carmel International Training Center, also an arm of Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Dr. Rem previously served as the Gender Equality Rapporteur for the Council of Europe. She was a researcher and lecturer at the Israeli Research Institute for the Study of Israel at the Ben Gurion University, my apologies, in Israel. So welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and lovely to be with you. We're excited here. Hi, Shalom from Haifa, Israel. The Mashav Carmel Training Center is here on the Mount Carmel, and we're very happy to continue to collaboration with Beit Ruth and with new and old friends from the United States, from Florida, and also for everyone who just joined us, past and future participants of our training activities. The Mashav Carmel Training Center has been working on promoting gender equality and women's empowerment since its establishment in 1961. It was established by Golda Meir, then Foreign Minister of Israel. And through training activities, seminars, and courses in Israel and abroad, we've been working on socioeconomic development. And today I'll share with you a little bit of what we do specifically for the topic we're here to discuss today, which is combating violence. And we here at the center has focused on 3 areas of training. One of them is combating gender-based violence. Another is domestic violence, and also combating human trafficking. We do that through content that we have developed throughout the years that focuses on prevention measures, treatment methods, and rehabilitation models. Our methodology is usually about, first of all, raising awareness and sharing experiences. We have people coming from around the world to discuss together. So our expertise is global exchange, is to hear everyone's experience and best practices, but also challenges, and then to be practical and find solutions together that we can then implement in our respective countries. We do that with local partners, just like the Beit Ruth. We work with other organizations here in Israel, with civil society, with the Ministry of Justice, with the Ministry of Welfare, but also we look to new technologies and startups that deal with safety, specifically for women and young girls. We also work with international organizations that bring the global agenda, and then share again with the international community the resolutions and a lot of policy change and discussions that we do here during our trainings and seminars. For the specific topic of combating gender-based violence, we have had over 600 participants coming here to discuss this topic from around the world, and you can see the various professions of people that come to work to hopefully one day even eradicate this phenomenon. And we continue to receive these people here with us, very special, dedicated professionals. Excited to tell you, and Anna here on the Zoom as well is leading a training just like that, combating gender-based violence, that we will host next week. So we have people coming from over 20 countries, and about 24 people will join us next week to discuss together for 2 weeks, all dedicated to how we can find more solutions and learn from each other about combating gender-based violence. So we're honored and to be part of this effort, global effort, and to be a hub to discuss, and we will continue to do so. And we thank you of being partners and active partners, active listeners, and also implementers of future solutions. So Daraba, thank you everyone, and we wish you an important and an interesting event to follow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ham, and thank you for the work you are doing to end gender-based violence. It is now my pleasure to introduce Randy Kogan. Randy is a trauma therapist who has worked in the field of mental health counseling for more than 30 years. Along with individual and couple sessions, Randy has led numerous trauma therapy groups, which include survivors of domestic and sexual violence. She is certified in both domestic and sexual violence trauma and has been an expert in the field working with individuals who have post-traumatic stress disorder. Randy is a consultant for professionals in the field and has testified as an expert witness in several cases. She has been featured on many shows, including the Dr. Oz Show and 60 Minutes Australia. And as we said, she can be seen now in the Netflix documentary, Ghislaine Maxwell, Filthy Rich, sharing her expert opinions and experience working with the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Randy, we're so grateful to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. Unfortunately, talking about a topic that is extremely difficult, yet so important for people to understand. So I'm so happy I have the opportunity to share this. Danielle was saying earlier, for some reason, it doesn't want to work right now. There we go. Sorry, everybody, technical difficulties. Of course, there we go. There we go, okay. As Danielle was saying earlier, that there is no discrimination when it comes to victims of sexual violence or domestic violence for that matter. Offenders don't look for age or gender or ethnicity or socioeconomic background. I want to give a definition of what we'll be speaking about today, which is sexual exploitation. Sexual exploitation is a type of sexual abuse in which an adult takes advantage of a power imbalance to force or entice a child into engaging in sexual activity. This can come in the form of special attention or gifts or affection or money for performing sexual acts or for allowing others to perform sexual acts on them. 90% of child victims know their abuser. We are no longer speaking about stranger danger. Now, it is so important for me to have people understand that there is no discrimination when it comes to children. So I always give this example of different populations of children that are being victimized. And as you can see, it covers everybody, whether it's at-risk youth, individuals who have little to no self-confidence, individuals who are bored and isolated, individuals who need a sense of belonging, children who have had past or current sexual abuse in the home, or children who have good homes with healthy families. Who is grooming our children for sexual exploitation? As I said earlier, there's no more stranger danger. These are individuals that are in our children's trust circle, in our trust circle, family members, friends of family, teachers, coaches, religious leaders, celebrities. We see it all over the news now. The Me Too movement has come in. Babysitters, people in the helping profession, people who we are sending our children to get physical help, to get emotional help, are the ones who are harming our children. Let's talk about what this means, this grooming means. It's so important for us to understand the meaning of what we're speaking of. Grooming involves building trust with the child and the family members of the children if they have access to the family. In extreme cases, offenders may use threats and physical force to assault the children, but more commonly, they are subtle approaches where they feel that they can make the victim a part of the abuse, where they can make the victim feel that they are partly responsible of the abuse. The offender, like I said earlier, is usually employed by the family member or in the victim's circle of trust. So we're talking teachers, family members, youth group leaders who naturally have interaction with our victims and who have natural contact with our families. I want to share an example. In 2004 and 2005, Megan and another student started a private school in 4th grade. They were 9 years old. This was a religious school that they started for academics. They found out that their teacher, Stephen Budd, was, quote, the coolest teacher in the school. So they were very excited to hear that they had this popular teacher. Now, Megan didn't know this other girl until the first day of school. The first day of school, Megan and this girl became fast friends. Stephen Budd took a liking to these two girls and looked at them as special and made them feel special. So when he would have stations in his class where each student, a group of students would be doing some math work, other students would be doing a reading group, other students would be doing a creative arts group, he would allow Megan and her friend to go under his desk and play. As time went on, he would start assaulting them while they were playing under the desk. He would expose them. He would start using his feet and fondling them. As time on, his abuse would ramp up throughout the school year. His class would go to a different classroom and have a different teacher for Spanish. And Mr. Budd would remove these two girls from the Spanish class to give them extra credit time alone in the classroom. Now, when Stephen Budd would award his students, he would award them with what is called Bud Bucks. And you can exchange those Bud Bucks for candy or other special little gifts. So each time that Megan and her friend would accomplish a sexual task that Stephen Budd would like them to accomplish, they would receive extra Bud Bucks. And this would go on throughout the school year. However, his abuse would ramp up. So it would start off where he would simply fondle them. And then he would have them engage in sexual acts on one another. He would take pictures of the two of them and he would have them pose together. And this went on for the entire school year. Now, he would tell the girls that this was their special secret together. And if they shared this with anybody, then they wouldn't be able to have this special time together. And that Mr. Budd would no longer be able to be their teacher. And they didn't want to take that risk because of how special he was making them feel, especially that they were new students. So Megan thought, since she was going to private school, that her private parts being touched was part of the process of being in a private school. One day, Megan wanted to jest with Stephen Budd. So she came to school and told Mr. Budd that she told her mother about their special time together. And Mr. Budd became upset with her. and explained to her the consequences that would happen if that was the case. And she made it clear that she was just kidding and never told her, she promised that she would never tell her mother, and that that would never happen, that she was just joking, because she didn't want to lose that special relationship that Mr. Budd created for her. Now, Megan held on to this story until she was 16 years old. And the only reason why she shared with her parents the abuse at age 16 was because Mr. Budd reached out to her through Facebook and attempted to friend her. And that triggered all of the memories that she was suppressing for those years. And she shared her story with her parents. And her parents reported this to law enforcement. And Mr. Budd now is serving a life sentence in jail. Let's talk about the grooming process. There are 4 stages to the grooming process. Offenders move through these stages to build trust, create secrecy, and to push boundaries for the ultimate goal of victimizing the child. The first stage is identifying the child. Who is the offender looking for? What is the age of the child? What is the opportunity that the offender has to gain access to this particular child? Now, in the case of Mr. Budd, these were 2 new students that knew nothing about him, do not know any other students and staff at the school, and nobody knows them. So this was a good opportunity to identify 2 victims that were vulnerable and very accessible to him. The next stage is to gain trust and access. This is where Mr. Budd gave the students special attention to make them feel like they were accepted with their teacher. And Mr. Budd also would let their parents know how well they're doing and how much they're excelling in school, so the parents don't worry about them during this process. The third stage is to isolate the child. This is where Mr. Budd would tell them that they can't discuss the relationship because then he will no longer be their teacher. So he's creating this opportunity to keep secrets and to teach Megan and the other students how to keep secrets where he can maintain this process of abusing them throughout the school year. The fourth stage is desensitization. This is where the offenders will slowly desensitize them to touch, to where they are able to fully sexually abuse the children in a way that they want. So with Mr. Budd, he started by allowing the girls go under the desk and let them feel comfortable under the desk and let them feel as though they are the only students that Mr. Budd is allowing. And each time they do a certain behavior or a certain act for Mr. Budd, they were rewarded with Budd Bucks. So this was positive reinforcement for them. So as they were getting positive reinforcement, Mr. Budd was desensitizing them to the sexual abuse that he was going to continue to progressively engage as the school year went on. These are typical signs of grooming. So going in above and beyond to be overly helpful to the child and or the family. So Mr. Budd taking the students out of Spanish class to make them believe that they were going to get extra credit to improve their grade was a sign of grooming. Why only those 2 girls was he removing from the class? Showing special interest in the children, giving gifts to the child or the family. So these girls were getting extra Budd Bucks, which in turn, they were getting extra gifts from Mr. Budd. He was overly affectionate with them in a way that only the students saw. Child predators are not who people think they are because they're charming, they're available, they're accessible, they're helpful. So it disarms the children and family, giving these offenders easier access to the children without having to force anything upon them. The effects of grooming. What happens in this situation is the survivor, the child, is left feeling this shame. and self-blame, because with the grooming process, it makes the children feel as though they are playing a part in their own abuse. They are complicit in the sexual act. And unfortunately, what happens is this makes them feel as though they are not able to speak. They are not able to share with other individuals what happened, because it gives the illusion of consent. This is a perceived consent that these children are walking around thinking that because he didn't force this on me, then I must be responsible for this action. And in turn, what happens is they hold on to it and they suppress. And this can go on for a very long period of time. This can go on for weeks, months, or years. And what happens is these trauma reactions come into play. Now, these reactions can start immediately, or we may not identify these reactions until later in life with these children. And what happens during the interim, because the children is suppressing this pain that from the trauma that they endured, from the victimization. And remember, the victimization can be one time or multiple times throughout a child's life. Okay. And the more that they feel that they are part of it, the more they're going to hold on to it. However, many times in the child's life, and as they grow, symptoms may appear or emotions may appear that they're not ready to deal with. So what happens is they want to continue to suppress or numb these reactions. And many times they'll do so through self-medication or self-harm. So we have to make sure that we're looking for any reactions within the individual. And these are some example. These are some example of cognitive reactions. No interest in any sexual behavior as they're getting older or when they become adults, or they become aggressive and promiscuous. There's a sense of confusion as to, I know this was wrong, that this happened to me. However, they didn't force it on me. So it must be that I gave them the indication that it was okay. Having problems communicating. Well, they were told, for whatever period of time that they were being abused, that if they tell, either they're not going to have this trusted adult in their life, or something horrible is going to happen to them or their family. Because sometimes the offender will threaten them and will make them believe that there will be consequences, and the consequences are going to be their fault. So for whatever reason it may be, they're going to hide their emotions, or they're not going to share with somebody close to them out of fear of judgment, out of fear that they're going to get in trouble, or out of fear that they're letting the abuser down. Here are some other trauma reactions that they could experience as well. Trouble with sleep, with appetite. Many times victims will develop an eating disorder because they feel that they don't have control over their own emotions because they've suppressed them for so long, that they will try and over control their eating, or they try and over control their sexual relationship with others, where the very thing they're trying to control now is they're having issues with and they have no control over. So now we're talking about an eating disorder. Now we're talking about an individual who's having nightmares every night. We're talking about an individual who's experiencing somatic issues like headaches, stomach aches, where there's no medical cause for their symptoms. Many times they'll feel dirty. They'll want to shower over and over and over again to get that dirty feeling off of them. When they have this feeling of being dirty and that they want to cleanse themselves, sometimes what comes from that is obsessive thinking of they need to feel clean, and compulsive actions of constantly showering, constantly needing to wash their clothing or to wash their hands to get rid of that feeling of dirty. Experiencing guilt and shame. This comes around in the form of self-blame as well. they feel as though it is their fault and that they have done something wrong. So this won't impact their feeling of confidence or self-worth. How do we protect our children? We need to teach our children body safety, and they need to understand what it means to protect their bodies. We also need to let them know what the proper names of body parts. You know, in every family, in every culture, we have names for body parts. You know, we call them different terms in order to make children understand, or we have certain pet names for our body parts when our children are younger. But they need to know what the proper names are to help them communicate. God forbid somebody touches them in a way that is not appropriate. We need to help the child understand that nobody should be looking at, touching, or playing games with any of their body parts. We need to allow the child to say no to being touched, to being hugged, to being kissed by anybody. And those of you who are parents and we're going to visit family, we usually say to our children, go give grandma a hug and kiss hello. Go give Aunt Cheryl and Uncle Bob a hug and a kiss. Go say goodbye. Go kiss everybody goodbye. And we need to allow them to be able to say no and respect their wishes if they don't feel comfortable doing so. Because if we don't, then they will feel that they are required and obligated to allow touch to occur when they don't feel safe in the process. We need to talk to the child about the importance of not keeping secrets, especially when it comes to our body parts, and let them know who they can speak to if somebody breaks those rules. It is very important that a child understands who is safe to them and who they can trust. And that becomes a conflict or a concern for parents when we're starting to see here that we're not looking at stranger danger, that this could be a teacher in our school, just as Megan and her friend experienced. So we need to let them know that if you don't feel safe in school, if you don't feel safe with your teacher, please make sure that they know who the principal is, who the assistant principal is in that school, or who a counselor is. Some do's and don'ts when we're interacting with children. Please make sure that you understand that the relationship is very important. If you don't have a trusting relationship with a child with whom you're concerned, please make sure you bring them to an individual who has that rapport with them so they feel safe talking about this difficult topic of victimization. So please make sure that you have that rapport or you have that relationship with the child. Normalize the feelings. Let them know that anybody who has experienced what you experience would absolutely have these emotions. So normalize the feelings that the child has. Validate how they are feeling. Validate what they are telling you. And listen. Even if you want to ask questions, listen to what they have to say so they know that this is a safe place and that they will not be shut down. Come to the place of belief. Sometimes the stories that you will hear, some of the stories of victimizations that I have heard have been so unbelievable that you couldn't imagine that occurred. And I'll give you an example. I was treating an adult who was having a very hard time with her trauma symptoms to a point where she needed to be hospitalized for crisis management and for a medication evaluation. When she was in the hospital, she called me in a panic because the nurses and the doctors were talking about putting her on an antipsychotic medication because they thought that she was delusional and paranoid when she was telling her trauma story. So what I needed to do was I needed to have a conference call with the psychiatrist and the nursing station to help them understand that her story was exactly what she was telling them. That as unbelievable as it sounded, that she was telling the truth and to please understand that she needs the validation and the safe support so she can continue to share her story for the process of healing. And then once I explained it to them, they allowed the adult to speak more about her childhood and came from a place of belief and listened to her. But because that happened, she didn't want to open up to them anymore. And I had to help her do so through her one-to-ones with her psychiatrist until she felt safe. Please make sure that they are getting the right therapy. Making sure that the therapist that you are sending them to, or the therapist that is going to be treating them, has the professional experience that they need to treat the child or the adolescent accordingly. Work at their pace. They may start telling you what happened. They may start telling you about the individual and no longer want to share in that moment. Make sure you're respecting their wishes and let them know that you'll go back to it when they are ready. If it is not at their pace and it is forced, they will shut down because they do not feel that they have a safe environment to talk about it and to talk about it when it's in their control. Because so much control was taken away from them during the victimization, we want to make sure that they have control over their trauma story. Let's talk a little bit about the don'ts. Don't react to the trauma, which is very hard to do sometimes, especially when they're telling you something that you cannot believe another human being can do to a child. But many times when we react, the child is going to want to support us and, make us feel and comfort us. And we don't want the tables to turn. We are there for the child. The child is not there to make us feel better about their trauma story. And unfortunately, many times what happens is when the child sees a reaction from another individual when they're trying to share, and they see that maybe that reaction is making that adult feel uncomfortable, they're not going to want to share their story. Or what they may do is they may sugarcoat it a little bit and make it as though it wasn't as bad as it really was. So the adult who is listening does not feel bad or does not have a reaction. So we really want to be careful with that. We don't want to minimize, and this kind of goes along with what I was saying before. We don't want to minimize, well, at least you're here to talk about it, okay? Because if we're minimizing, again, we're taking away from the intensity of the trauma that the child endured, okay? Don't touch the individual that you're speaking to without permission. So many times when we're speaking to somebody, we may want to put our hand on their shoulder, or maybe put our hand on their knee or on their hand to let them know we're listening, or to let them know that we're there to support them. But we have no idea how that offender started the desensitization process. So if the offender started the desensitization process by putting his hand on the victim's shoulder to make them feel at ease, we don't want to trigger them. We don't want to trigger any flashbacks. So we want to make sure that we're asking permission to touch the child victim. We do not want to say what we understand or we can relate, even if we can relate. Even if you have experienced a similar victimization than the child, we don't want to take that away from them and make it about us. Even if we feel that we're relating to them, we want to make sure that we're not doing that, because again, if we take the power away from the child of the child telling their story, they may want to shut down, or they may want to deflect and want to hear more about your story so they don't have to share about the painful event. So we really want to make sure that the focus stays on the child and the child's victimization. Please don't try and talk to them about the victimization if they are not ready. And that goes back to the do's of working at their pace. If we try and force this conversation and the child shuts down, we don't know if that child is going to want to open up and discuss it again anytime soon. And what we're doing then is we're delaying the healing process. And we do not want to delay the healing process. If we can start this healing process in the childhood stage, the child has a much better opportunity of healing and starting their lives with this victimization incorporated into their life, but it's not taking over their life. And lastly, let's make sure that we do not tell the victim that it will go away. Because my goal as a therapist is not to take away and not to have the victim forget that it happened. What we want to do is we want to help the victim have a sense of mastery over their trauma story, where they're not experiencing the intensity of their trauma reactions in their everyday life. Long-term impact. So the long-term impact of grooming, okay, can absolutely cause issues in relationships later in life. What happened? The offender in this grooming process took boundaries away. They gradually took away any boundary that the child knew about or that was set for the child or the child was setting for him or herself, right? So because boundaries were taken away, now they're going to be looking for relationships that don't have boundaries if they didn't have the opportunity to heal. And what happened, I was speaking earlier about that self-blame and how victims don't want to talk about it because they believe that they had responsibility. What happens is they may not feel that they deserve healthy relationships in their lives, especially if they haven't gone through the healing process yet. They may feel submissive to others because they feel that they don't deserve anything more. And if they have a low sense of self, they're going to look for an individual that is going to have an inflated sense of self, almost as though they can be their partner's shadow. That gives their partner an opportunity to abuse. And that's what we want to help these children steer clear from. So if we can help them heal at a young age, and we can identify the signs of being groomed, and we can identify trauma reactions, and we can get them the help that they need and get them to the proper individuals who can support them, guide them, help them heal, then we are hoping that we can help them avoid unhealthy relationships later in life. And unfortunately, what happens is when we're talking about unhealthy relationships, we're talking about getting into relationships that exhibit coercive control. And coercive control is an extreme problem internationally. And unfortunately, with the pandemic, coercive control and domestic abuse got so much worse along with child abuse. So we have to know what this means. We have to know what this looks like. We have to help these children heal at a young age so we can help them identify red flags in an individual. We have to help them create boundaries for themselves so they don't get to a point where they feel they deserve an individual who's going to exercise coercive control. What is coercive control? Coercive control is a persistent pattern of controlling, coercive, and threatening behavior, including all or some forms of domestic abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, mental abuse, financial abuse, sexual abuse by a spouse, a partner, or an ex-partner. This is trapping victims and making them feel as though it is impossible to leave an abusive situation. 60 to 80% of women seeking assistance for abuse have experienced coercive control. And more disturbing, more than half of adults who are abused as children experiences domestic abuse later in life. And this is why it is so important for us to make sure that we are giving these children a forum, a venue to be able to share their abusive story. Some signs of coercive control that you can look for in an adult, in friends, in coworkers, in individuals, or knowing that if we don't help these children, this is something, these are the signs that they're going to experience later in life. This is what we want to help them prevent. We want to help them prevent that they are not having freedom as an adult when this offender took freedom away from them as a child. And many of these children lose the opportunity to be children because of the victimization. They don't get the opportunity to experience what it's like to play with other children in a healthy manner, to be able to play toys that is age appropriate. We want our children to maintain lives as children, and as they get older, go through the proper stages of development to become healthy adults. So these are some signs that are obvious when it comes to coercive control. So what we're seeing here is we have an individual, okay, that does not discriminate. We have an offender that does not discriminate against children. Okay, we have an offender that is that's going to use tools to gain trust into the child's family, to gain access and accessibility to these children, to make these children feel that they are a part of the sexual abuse that they are enduring by these horrific individuals, who are the very individuals that we are having our children learn from. We're having our children get help from. We're having our children get medical help from, to get religious guidance from. And these are the very individuals that are harming our children. So I hope this was helpful in identifying the signs and the definitions of exploitation and grooming, and what are the long-term effects. Thank you so much for having me.
Randy, thank you so much. Thank you for helping us define what violence looks like, what a perpetrator can look like, and for enlightening us about how we can protect our children from harm. Thank you, really. We'll hear now from my colleague in Israel, Mor Lippin. Mor is losing her voice, but I think she'll get through this. Mor holds a BA in Behavioral and Management Sciences and an MA in Social Work for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder from Tel Aviv University. She's a specialist in the treatment of complex post-traumatic stress disorder in girls and women. Mor joined Beit Ruth in 2006, developing psychotherapeutic treatments for girls. She's cared for hundreds of girls at Beit Ruth and has also guided the educational staff toward effective care. Mor has served in many capacities, including as village manager, where she led the Beit Ruth team in spearheading treatment of at-risk girls in Israel, as well as provided lectures to mental health professionals and other professionals throughout Israel and actually outside of Israel as well. Welcome, Mor. Can someone unmute Mor, please?
מור, את במיוט, תפתחי, את במיוט. מור, תפתחי את המיוט. Okay, you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry for my voice. I catch a cold and it's go worse than worse, but I'll try. Thank you, Danielle. Hello, everybody. As Danielle said, my name is Mor Ben Simchon Lippin. and I am a social worker and specialist in treating complex post-trauma. Unfortunately, abuse and neglect are experienced by far too many children who are at the mercy of their parents who do not fulfill their duties and, in the worst case, abused and cause serious harm. One of the first results of this abuse is broken trust by children toward the very people who were supposed to protect them, as well as a deep sense of abandonment. As you heard, Beit Ruth is a long-term resident and youth village for girls aged 13 to 18 who have been physically, emotionally, and sexually abused or neglected. Because of their history of childhood abuse and the resulting pain, the majority of our girls suffer from symptoms of trauma. We are a pioneer in treating girls who experience trauma and one of the first youth villages in Israel to provide treatment through gender lens. And because government system cannot handle the overwhelming number of girls who need care in Israel, an estimated 30,000 girls are deemed to be at risk. We are also an incubator of ideas that help to address the needs of girls throughout Israel. The teenage stage brings with it many challenges. This is a turbulent, rebellious, and unstable age for all teenagers, but it is an important and necessary stage in emotional development for boys and girls as they form their personality. Our focus at Beit Ruth is teenage girls who are referred to us through Israel's Ministry of Welfare after the court have declared them as a minor in need because they're being abused or their parents are unable to take care of them. This is our population focus because we know and research shows that until the teenage stage, the same percentage of boys and girls suffer from abuse. However, typically beginning at age 13, boys and girls begin to behave differently in response to their abuse. A significant portion of boys act out, behave aggressively, and cause damage to the environment. In other words, they demand to be heard. In contrast, the vast majority of girls at this stage begin to exhibit self-destructive behaviors and self-harm in response to abuse. They go unnoticed by teachers, healthcare providers, or others who come in contact with them. A girl can hide the fact that she is being abused, and therefore she will not be identified for protection and care. This means girls continue to be victimized throughout and beyond their teenage years and experience longer and deeper trauma. From the day it was established, Beit Ruth has treated abuse through this gender lens. The girls are cared for by strong and inspiring all-female team who serve as role model for them, as well as create a safe and empowering environment. Our goal is to rehabilitate our girls and to connect them to their strengths and abilities. In order to create trust and meaningful relationships, our staff undergo intensive professional development and are specially training treating complex post-trauma. Girls who were abused and neglected in childhood reach puberty with many emotional difficulties because their emotional and sometimes physical needs were not met. The traumas they experience color the whole world. There is no past and no future, only a nightmarish present that they relive over and over again. Our girls lack the tools to face the world. Even though they are teenagers, their emotional capacity appears like much younger children because of their unmet needs. In order to cope, they detached. In response to the lack of attention by people and systems that are supposed to protect them, girls become desperate to escape abuse. They drop out of school, disconnect from normative society, and cannot connect to those who live in the margin of society. They may begin to live on the street, engage in unsafe sexual behavior, attempt suicide, and abuse drugs and alcohol. These behaviors produce deeper and deeper trauma, and this is a key. A person who doesn't understand that these behaviors are responses to abuse and are cries for help, blame and accuse girls for acting out in inappropriate ways. At Beit Ruth, we understand that this behavior are responses to pain caused by abuse and neglect. There is no place for judgment or punishment. The task of the responsible adult at Beit Ruth, this is our staff of therapists, house counselor, social workers, and others, is to provide each girl with the safe condition to rebel, and as all teenagers do, as part of discovering who they are. We work to replace the pain with love, compassion, and strong desire for positive relationships, along with appropriate boundaries that provide security, something all of us human beings need. Our method is like three circles that touch each other and are dependent on each other's: treatment, life skills, and education. These three circles represent a wide range of behaviors related to trauma, at the center of which is restoring the feeling of control over one's life, restoring a sense of security, creating a sense of belonging, and creating a sense of love and meaning. All of these factors are necessary for every person to live a safe and meaningful life. When girls arrive to Beit Ruth, they come with very little motivation, low interpersonal skills, and behaviors that pose a real risk to their emotional and physical safety. Beit Ruth's care team understand that every single girl comes to us with wounded and bruised soul. They lack trust, and out of helplessness, they formulate strategies to deal with their pain. For example, self-harming behavior can turn emotional pain into physical pain, as well as cause girls to emotionally detached. They may use alcohol or drugs to numb themselves or to ease the pain. Our initial goal is to stabilize each girl's behavior, to connect her to her strengths and ability, to show her that she is much more than the trauma that happened to her. In a slow and gentle process, we teach our girls that we will never use our power against them. We will take care of them, love them, and insist on seeing all the goodness and beauty in them. Because girls have low motivation, we create rewards for positive behavior that help them adapt to life in the village. Reward for going to school, waking up on time, cooperating with the staff, etc. Slowly, girls begin to internalize the feeling of success because they begin to feel good about themselves. We provide external rewards to produce internal motivation. At the same time, we need to be careful about triggering the trauma until they have the strength to deal with it. Otherwise, they may regress. This process is circular and takes years. We stabilize them and address what a girl discusses about her experience. We give each girl the space to talk about her trauma. Meeting and fulfilling each girl's physical and emotional needs sows the seeds on healing and growth. Girls feel a sense of belonging to Beit Ruth, to Israel, and the world. Sometimes the seeds will remain deeply buried and her behavior will continue to be stormy and unstable for a long time. But the seeds that were sown in her soul are slowly making their way to her mind. Pain-based behaviors that put her in danger make room for possibility to be supported, to be helped, to receive love, and to build or restore a broken self-image. When the self-image is strengthened, a wide space of possibilities open up to her, and she dares, perhaps for the first time in her life, to dream of reality different from what she believed her destiny to be. Little by little, in a long, difficult, and ongoing process, we witnessed the miracles that happen before our eyes. The girls find their inner strength. They began to dream big dreams, take risks, and cautiously take the first steps to allow us to help them and to have meaningful and trusting relationships. We just have to give them the chance. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much more. Thank you. And you did great despite your voice. So rest it up. Rabbi Menachem Creditor serves as the Pearl and Ira Meyer Scholar in Residence at UJA-Federation New York, which I'm proud to say is one of Beit Ruth's long-standing partners. Rabbi Creditor was the founder of Rabbis Against Gun Violence, an acclaimed author, scholar, and speaker with over 2 million views of his online videos and essays. He was named by Newsweek as one of the 50 most influential rabbis in America. He has published 30 books and 6 albums of original music. We're very grateful for his participation today. Please help me welcome Rabbi Menachem Creditor.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Randy, Moore, and Gideon, and the entire Beit Ruth family. I feel so grateful to be present with all of you and to represent UJA-Federation in New York. We are so proud to support Beit Ruth's sacred mission to ensure that vulnerable and at-risk girls are given the opportunity to thrive emotionally, socially, and academically. This is also a really important thing for me to do as a man. And I wanted to begin with my being humbled to be included in this conversation. It is not something I know how to do well because I don't know what it is to have a body that isn't mine. And society gives me a very strange kind of privilege that I did nothing to earn. And that became clear to me over and over in different moments of my life, especially one that I think about often. I was in a parking garage a few years ago, and I was going back toward my car, and a woman had just parked her car, and she was looking for the exit because it was a very confusing parking garage. And so just wanting to help, I said, "Oh, this is the direction you want to go." And I saw her reach into her purse, and something startled her eyes, and I don't know what she was reaching for. And I suddenly realized I had never been afraid in a parking garage before. And I know that that is just a simple example of which there must be countless in so many people's lives, and that's in typical encounters. What Beit Ruth does in the deepest and most fragile and traumatized, vulnerable realities that our children, especially young girls and young women, face. It makes what I do as a man very important, but it also should remind me that I have a very limited understanding no matter how hard I'll try. So thank you for including me. We are having among the most important conversations that most communities don't want to have. And I want to begin with what I'm going to end in saying, right? We say, Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. Let me say in the beginning what I intend to say by the end, which is that Judaism demands the absolute rejection of all forms of abuse and demands that we do everything in our power to protect our children from abuse. Abuse does happen in Jewish families. Physical and verbal and emotional abuse happen in Jewish families, and way too often the Jewish community colludes to continue the abuse. So the two most important things I'm going to say is that we must believe women when they speak. We must believe children when they speak. A few years ago, actually many years ago, I forget how long I've been a rabbi, I gave a drash once, a drasha, a sermon in my community where I addressed domestic violence. And these very sweet members of the community, two sweet regulars on Shabbat, came up to me and said, Rabbi, you really shouldn't speak about such ugly things from the Bima. That doesn't happen in our community. And based on the title of today's conversation, it's clear to me that that kind of comment and perception happens all over the place, because I didn't suggest the title of today's conversation. I just heard it from two well-intentioned people. But if they had only known that the reason I chose to speak about it that Shabbat was because 2 rows behind them and a little bit to the left, it just had. We don't like to talk about what is ugly and painful, and we feel ashamed. We don't want this to be true, but many of us are hurting. Some of us are suffering, maybe even someone who's listening to this conversation right now. And so it's so important for us to affirm that every one of us, you, if you're the one that I don't know that I'm speaking to, but care so deeply about, you matter. You are created in the image of God. You are worthy of dignity and respect. And it is my responsibility, it is our responsibility to do what we can to remind you of that and to build the structures that are safe for you and for everyone else. Victims of abuse, as we know, can be women or men, young or old, gay or straight. And it is reported, I think there are respectable studies that have suggested that in Jewish communities, women stay in abusive relationships longer because of the stigma that often comes about because of the silence, the choice of our leaders not to talk about this. So I want to reflect on two kinds of Jewish text and teachings, and then reflect as best as I can from the wisdom that has been shared by the experts on our panel in the shadow of the great light that Beit Ruth creates. The two texts I want to point to, one of them is Talmudic, and one of them is even earlier, prophetic, meaning from the Tanakh, from the Hebrew Bible. We don't actually like to think about this because it also implicates God. But since we're talking about the things where we are most raw, and where probably we as a Jewish community disagree pretty widely, the cycle of the prophets, and this has been described by the scholar Naomi Gretz, who is a writer in Israel, in her book from 1998 called Silence is Deadly. The cycle of abuse in the Nevi'im and the prophets looks like this. Top of the circle is, we and God are getting along great. It's wonderful. And then we see a shiny other God. This actually happens over and over in the Nevi'im if you study the text. Some other shiny thing distracts us from God. We become distracted and God gets angry. So God sends another nation to control us, to use its power, to abuse us. And we call out in our pain. God hears our cries, sends something or ourselves to overthrow our oppressor, and then it's okay again until. And actually, if we look at this through the lens of gender-based violence, one of the deepest problems we have is that within our tradition are texts that implicate God in the cycle of abuse. Of course, that's not what I mean by God. I would never be able to daven, to pray, to that God, to love that God, or to think that I could be healthily loved by that God. But it tells us that in the cycle of our people's history, and in all people's histories, there are these metaphors. There is this language. We are called to respond to it. And the rabbis amplify in their interpretive lens this cycle, so much so that there is a terrifying midrash. And since we're talking about terrifying realities, let's listen to the broken hearts of the rabbis who themselves believe that they have been experiencing abuse, even if they wouldn't have used that language. But in the aftermath of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, the temple in Jerusalem in 70 CE, where theoretically God is in control and we still suffered, listen to what they say. And I'm asking you not to accept this midrash as true, but accepting it as reflecting pain. When Israel was driven from Jerusalem, this is Midrash Rabbah on Shmot 31:10, for those who'd like to look it up. When Israel was driven from Jerusalem, their enemies took them out in chains, and the nations of the world said, the Holy Blessed One doesn't want God's people anymore. Just as silver is refined from its defects and then converted into utensil, refined and turned into utensils many times over, so too is Israel broken over and over, called, this is a text, rejected silver. So when the prophet Yirmiyahu heard this, says the rabbis, he came to God saying, is it true that you've rejected your people, God? Why have you smitten us and there's no healing? And the midrash goes somewhere I wish it wouldn't go, but et chata'ai ani maskir hayom. I have to acknowledge where we have missed the mark as a tradition here. Listen to the ancient words of this midrash and feel what you feel. And I'm telling you, I do too. The midrash continues to say, it can be compared to a man who was beating his wife. Her best friend asked him, how long will you go on beating her? If you wish to kill her, kill her. But if you don't wish her to die, why do you keep beating her? The man replied, oh, I would never divorce my wife. I would never kill her. Is this what Jeremiah said to God, says the Midrash? If your desire is to drive us out of this world, then do that. But don't hurt us like this. And God, in the Midrash, only in the Midrash, the rabbinic imagination says, oh, I'd never kill Israel. It's only because I love Israel. Friends, I'm sharing this text not because I like it. I don't. It's very hard to even say these words. But how can I be an authentic representative of our people and our tradition if I don't acknowledge the darkness that we were willing to amplify in our texts and face it head on and say, no more. For the sake of our children, for the sake of my children, no more. The rabbis might not know that they were victims of abuse, meaning they went through trauma, and this is how it sounds. But in the name of our tradition, there are rabbis still today who, in the name of a principle, an idea called Shalom Bayit, peace at home, send women who have been abused back home, thinking that that's the right thing to do. They're wrong. They don't believe women, and they aren't trained. They don't know how to hear, because visionaries like the leaders of Beit Ruth haven't been in every shul, and not every board of directors who hold systems accountable or should, or rabbis or educators are held accountable. So much so that because of tradition, women are denied a get, a divorce decree, in other words, are held in coercive patterns where only men are given by some forms of Judaism, power. That's not love. Love shouldn't hurt. And so I want to quote just a few things, and I know that I'm ramping up what has already been expressed with expertise and eloquence by those whose hands are truly healing others immediately, now, and in our midst. The great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said, violence against a human being is violence against God. Every one of us, every child is an image of God. And anyone who would hurt them is acting in a blasphemous way. We call that chet. We call that sin. So what are our Jewish communal responsibilities? Number one, believe women and believe children. Jewish organizations have to place information about access and safety resources should amplify the learning that Beit Ruth provides in safe spaces and in public view. And more than that, we have to robustly fund, and this is one of the reasons that I am so proud to be part of UJA, we must robustly fund training by experts and make it mandatory for every professional in every Jewish environment to go through a training, and then we have to make sure that the board's member themselves go through the same training. Because all too often, and friends of mine have been hurt when we were children by people, and just by the grace of God, I wasn't, people I looked to as mentors. And we didn't talk about it then, and we barely talk about it now. The power disparities have to be acknowledged, and the funders have to be involved in equalizing where we stand. So one last thought, not because it's going to tie anything up in a bow, and not because it's going to make us feel better, but we should feel proud about the way Zionism itself connects to this great work. For thousands of years, our years of powerlessness as a people, when we couldn't actually self-determine, we had no homeland, we were in exile. For all of those years, we sang a song, and I grew up singing this song. Whenever something drastic happened in the world, I would sing, Ani Ma'amin, I believe, with full faith in the coming of the Messiah. And then the swelling of my heart when I would sing the second half, ואף על פי שיתמהמה עם כל זה, אחכה לו. Though the Messiah may tarry, I will wait. I will wait. Why did we sing that song? It's a beautiful melody. There are a lot of beautiful melodies for this. Because maybe we didn't think we had the power to change our destiny for the better. Zionism was actually a response by those who didn't daven and didn't use traditional language, and they said enough of the powerlessness. Those who founded a new way of being Jewish in the world said, we have the agency to bring dignity to our bodies, to our souls, to our lives again. Beit Ruth is a combination of all of those important and redemptive ideas. We can make things better for our children, for ourselves, for our community, and for the world. Zionism said, I'm not waiting anymore. And thank God for the founders and visionaries and current expert practitioners at Beit Ruth. Thank God for the funders of Beit Ruth. Thank God, because we can't wait any longer. Our children need us now. And so with the weight of tradition, which is as imperfect as any effort, we have to continue to learn to do better until there is no need. May that day come soon and in our days. Handing it back to you all. Thank you for including me.
Thank you, Rabbi Creditor, for, despite saying that you have little understanding, you have great understanding. Thank you for your critical reflections that I know I will, and I think we all will. It will help us, all of us, move toward greater action in our communities, and we are not waiting. So thank you, Rabbi. To all of our esteemed speakers, thank you for sharing your expertise with us, for your passion to help victims of gender-based violence and working to create a world free of violence. And we do that by coming together as partners in this effort. And that serves to elevate the issue and empower all of us to make change from Gainesville to Israel, Ecuador to Mozambique, and beyond. And together we can, together we will. And Rabbi Creditor, you said thank you to our partners as well. Yes, thank you to our partners, to our supporters, to our donors, our contributors, our friends. Thank you. We have been monitoring the chat and also welcome you to add questions now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows, so we can get started with a few of those questions. I'm going to pick up my phone, look at them because a few of them have been sent to me. This is a question for Randy. Randy, please share, I'm not sure who this is from, but please share how victimization of children can play out over time in the girl's future choices, like a life partner. And is the risk primarily to herself, or is there a risk that this will create a cycle of abuse against her own children?
What a wonderful question. And it goes to what I was speaking about earlier, where how quickly can we identify that a child is suffering from victimization? So it really depends on when the child is ready to speak or when the child feels safe enough to speak. So that could be as the child is a child, or in adolescence, in young adulthood. So it really would depend upon when they start the healing process. Now, if they become an adult, they meet their life partner. And sometimes what happens is when they get into relationships, that's when they see the trauma reactions that they might not have seen before, when they're in an intimate, safe relationship. So at that time, what can happen is that's the time where they will reach out for therapy. That's the time where they recognize that their childhood has impacted them much more than they expected. So by that individual, that victim going to treatment, even if it is as an adult, and being open to work through the trauma and through the healing process, sometimes what I would do is I bring the partner in to help the partner understand what trauma reactions are, what they look like, and what support can be for the victim. So there is absolutely opportunities for that victim to get the healing that they need or get the help they need, whether it's just after victimization or years later. There is absolutely a wonderful opportunity for a great life with their life partner. In terms of it repeating, you know, there's so many factors that come into play when it comes to repeat violence, right? It depends upon culture. It depends upon family values. It depends upon, you know, is that family, do they have a family that is open and communicative? Do they have a culture that allows for the discussion of victimization? So there are so many factors that come into play. But is there potential for a fruitful, wonderful life without repeat violence? Yes, there is.
Yeah.
I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I certainly think it did. And I'm not the expert in the field, but we do know that abuse and violence is generational, and it's our work to not only work with the victims, the girls of abuse and violence, but to work with her so that generational cycle is broken and doesn't get passed on. So thank you so much, Randy. This is a question for Beit Ruth, and if Moore's voice is okay, we'll ask Moore to answer this. But when treating a girl who has been traumatized, is it possible to help her regain trust?
Okay, so it's possible, but we need to remember that she will never trust anyone. But I can tell you that some of our alumni are contact to us, and they see, and some of them are 30 and have their own children now. And they were breaking the chain of abuse, the circle of abuse. And they call Ronit or call me and say, you know, when I think about our relationship, I feel safe. I feel that I have someone in the world that I can trust. So it's very slowly, not all the time we succeed, but most of the time we create relationships that based on trust through our methodology. Okay, so because we are not punishment the girls, and we seek to connect them. And we want them to believe that we are the one that they can talk about everything. As Wendy, you said, they can come to us and say to us anything that happened to them, so they are not afraid anymore, because they will not be punished or blamed. So if a girl comes from a vacation and something bad happened to her, she knows to come to a counselor or social worker and say, hey, it's happened to me. And this is a great thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Moore. Another question for Beit Ruth. Does Beit Ruth ever share your best programs or methods with others? I'll actually answer that. Yes, we absolutely do. I think you see right here our partnership with JCNCF and certainly with Mashav, who's been a great partner with us and allowing us and giving us the platform to be able to share our best practice and what we've learned in the village, working with our girls and sharing that with others, with like-minded organizations, be it in Israel and working with Mashav outside of Israel. And I just want to say to Mashav, you've been an incredible partner, and there is so much more for us to do. And I know that we will continue working and focusing on our energies on where we need to. So thank you so much. Beyond programs like this, at Beit Ruth, we do share our best practices, not only because we do, but because we see it as an obligation, as a responsibility, as our tikkun olam, our responsibility to share what we've learned with others. We do that. We created a space, a physical space in the Beit Ruth village in Israel called the Center of Knowledge. It's within the village. It's a physical space where we host groups of professionals, including teachers, heads of schools, police officers, university professors, social workers, judges, lawyers, and hospital workers, and many others, to help teach how to identify signs of abuse, how to communicate with victims of abuse, their parents, their family, and what are the steps to take. So we do, and we do invite anyone here who has questions, who wants to learn more, to please contact us directly or through Mashav. We have a question for Rabbi Menachem, and I know Menachem credited. All right, I know we're running out of time, but if I will ask this question, Rabbi, what are the key psychological and spiritual strategies and practices we should undertake on a daily or weekly basis to help us be open to experiences of girls and women, to address violence in our communities?
I appreciate the question so much, and if I offer an authoritative answer, I've forgotten my introduction to my larger statement. Let me offer what I do to remain mindful, but let me only offer it as what I do to remain mindful, and I hope that we all will explore what it is to be a responsible human being. I wake up in the morning, even if I've had a hard time sleeping, because often the things that are true in this world, in my life and in the life of my neighbors, in the life of my children, and in the life of, people I don't yet know, it makes it hard to sleep when you pay attention. And so number one, I take care of myself enough that I can let in the truths that are not mine too. I say Modeh Ani, I am grateful because, as Maimonides suggests, as Rambam suggests, nothing I could ever do would make me worthy of this gorgeous world I get to inhabit for one more day. And that gives me the strength to face the world as it also is, which means listening to those who have been hurt in ways that I can't possibly fathom, and seeing myself as capable of helping. But if I see myself as capable of helping, and I think I'm the only one who's capable of helping, I've forgotten that I need to learn, and that vulnerability is universal, and I have to recognize that I don't have all the expertise. So the third thing, and perhaps the most important thing that I could suggest you do, is call Danielle. Call Beit Ruth and ask for wisdom, because when I think I know the answers, I have forgotten wisdom. As Emmanuel Levinas, a French Jewish philosopher, said, every piece of information I gain brings me one step closer to the brink of the abyss of my own ignorance. And so to be mindful and to be listening and to believe and to give trust is to recognize all I have is my own eyes, all I have is my own lived experience, and the gratitude that gives me strength to live today should also grant me the wisdom to ask for wisdom I don't yet have.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for that. I want to thank everyone for your thoughtful questions. I'm just looking at the time on this Sunday. I do want to thank everyone so much again, all of our speakers, Rabbi, of course, Randy, JCNCF, Linda, and our incredible partners in Israel, Mashav. This is certainly for us, it's not the beginning, but we continue this fight. We continue to move forward. We continue to build our community of supporters and friends and allies so that we can all address this issue. It makes us stronger when we are together and we walk this journey together. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to turn this over to Linda for some final remarks, and please know we are all available to you even after we log off this Zoom. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Danielle, and I'm humbled to have been a part of this. Thank you for everything that you do. I also want to add my thanks to all of our speakers and especially to everyone from around the globe who joined us today. Danielle said earlier that as humans, we tend to bury our heads in the sand and think that social ills don't happen in our own backyards, but we must face up to the fact that they do. And by facing up to this fact that they do, we can make things better. Tikkun olam, as the rabbi said. We hope that what you've learned today helps you to understand that violence against girls and young women happens everywhere, what trauma looks like, and how we can support those who are experiencing it, how we can protect children from harm, and what we can and must do to end gender-based violence everywhere. If you would like to contact Beit Ruth, Mashav, or Randy Kogan, we are putting together websites in the chat right now. We will also be sending everybody who registered a link to the recording, and we will put it up on our YouTube as well. Thank you again for joining us, and wherever you are, have a wonderful day or evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. We'll be in touch. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. From the bottom of my heart, we're changing the world.
Yes, we are. I've seen a lot of familiar faces, so I want to say thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Greg, Barbara Salmonson, and a lot of our friends here in New York and Israel. So our friends from Rwanda, I was happy to see. Thank you.
Susan, and you are the one that created all that. You have to remember it. You are the one, really.
No, I do.
No, it was your idea and your dream, and you are the inspiration of all of us. All this is under your inspiration. Believe me. I know what they say.
Well, I had a little bit of help from some incredible soldiers.
You are the
Warriors, female warriors.
They are female warriors, and we'll take male warriors too.
Oh, we have male warriors.
Yes, I know. I love that.
Tava, I see you. How are you?
Chava, tell mute.
Yes.
Ah.
Everyone, thank you so much. Linda, this was terrific. I look forward to seeing you in Gainesville and seeing a lot of our friends in Gainesville and our friends from Mashav. We will see you in April. Again, so much to do, but with partners like you, we know that we will go far.
Thank you. And to our friends at Mashav, when the recording is ready, When it processes, please email me a link and I will add it to our YouTube channel and share it on our social media.
Okay. Yeah.
תודה רבה לכם.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
very much, everyone.
Yes,
Thank you for
Thank
good
you.
presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.